My mom asked the waitress if she even understood English. My dad called her cheap labor with an accent. What they didn't know was, I knew that girl very well. Some people think family loyalty means staying silent. But if you've ever watched a story like this before, you know that silence can destroy more than it protects. Let me tell you what happened the night I broke my parents' perfect image, forever. It was supposed to be a casual family dinner. One of those last-minute, let's all catch up nights, at a nice Italian place they like to flaunt on social media. My mom wore her pearls. My dad kept bragging to the waiter about his golf handicap. And me. I just wanted to get through the night without a headache. Then she walked up to the table. Her name tag said Marisol. She had her hair tied in a neat braid and spoke with a soft accent. I knew that accent. I recognized that voice. My stomach twisted. She didn't look at me at first. She didn't need to. I already knew it was her. Marisol and I had gone to college together. We weren't just classmates, we were close. Late-night study sessions, long talks about dreams, frustrations, family. She was one of the smartest, kindest people I'd ever met. But after graduation, we lost touch. And now here she was, wearing an apron, serving my parents. And my parents, they didn't recognize her. Not even a flicker of memory. Just judgment. Where are you from, honey? My mom asked, already knowing what she was trying to imply. I was born in New Jersey, Marisol said, smiling politely. Oh, but where's your real family from? That word, real. My blood boiled. Marisol didn't flinch. My parents were born in El Salvador. My dad scoffed. Figures. They bring in these people to work for nothing and call it opportunity. Meanwhile, we pay through the nose for food. I looked up sharply. Dad. What? He snapped. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. No, they weren't. Marisol held herself together. I could see it, that invisible shield, the one people wear when they've heard this 100 times before. She took our drink orders and left. I wanted to follow her to say something, anything, but I sat there, frozen. That's the thing about moments like this. You don't always act right away. Sometimes, you just feel everything at once and do nothing. And then you regret it. Halfway through the meal, my mom waved her over like she was calling a dog. You forgot the extra napkins. Marisol apologized, brought them over, and turned to leave. You should really work on your English, my dad muttered. Loud enough for her to hear. That was it. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor. My parents looked at me like I'd grown another head. Excuse me, I said, and walked straight to the back where the waitstaff disappeared behind a curtain. Marisol, I said softly. She turned. Her eyes widened. Oh my God. Liam. I nodded. I'm so sorry. She gave a sad smile. It's okay. I'm used to it. No, I said. You shouldn't be. We talked for 10 minutes. I asked her how she ended up there, why she never called. She told me her parents got sick, and she dropped everything to take care of them. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, like working hard to make ends meet was something to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of the job, she said. Just the way people look at me now. Like I'm nothing. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Even after I went back to the table, even as my parents acted like they hadn't said a word wrong. Something in me broke that night. Or maybe, something woke up. Because the next morning, I started digging. I was going to give my parents a taste of what it felt like to be exposed, vulnerable, and stripped of the lies they built around themselves. They wanted to look down on someone for working hard? They had no idea what I knew. And they were about to find out. The next morning, I couldn't eat. I stared at my cereal, swirling the spoon around like it would give me answers. All I could hear was my dad's voice from the night before. Cheap labor with an accent. The same man who'd told me to respect everyone growing up. The man who made speeches at church about values. The man I used to admire. Now I saw him for what he really was. A fraud. I opened my laptop and started searching. Not just random Googling. I knew what I was looking for. My father ran a construction business, one that had grown surprisingly fast over the last decade. Big contracts. Political donations. Speeches at local events. And yet, something had never felt right. I went to the county court records and typed in his company's name. What popped up made my heart race. 3 lawsuits. Quiet ones. All from former workers. All immigrants. Claims of unpaid wages, unsafe conditions, threats of deportation. All settled. Silently. Why hadn't I seen this before? Then I remembered, Dad always made sure I stayed out of the business side. He said it was too messy, and not something you should worry about. I believed him. I trusted him. But now I was angry. Because while he sat there judging Marisol for doing honest work, he'd been exploiting people like her for years. And my mom. She knew. Of course she knew. She was the one who handled the paperwork. She filed the taxes. She signed the NDAs. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. My parents weren't just mean. They were criminals hiding behind church smiles and charity events. And I had proof. But I wasn't going to confront them yet. Not until I had everything. I called Marisol that afternoon. She answered on the first ring. Liam. I need to see you. Today. Please. We met at a small park near her apartment. She looked nervous but curious. I brought my laptop, opened the files, and showed her the lawsuits. She blinked. Your dad did this. I nodded. And your mom. She helped cover it up. Marisol sat down on the bench, silent. I waited. Then she looked at me with fire in her eyes. I know 2 other women who worked for him. They had similar stories. One of them, she lost her baby after falling on site. They made her finish her shift. My jaw clenched. Can you get me in touch with them? She nodded. They don't trust many people. But if I explain that I'm not here to protect him, I said, I want to bring him down. And just like that, Marisol and I became partners in vengeance. We started collecting everything. Witness statements, pay stubs, photos of work conditions. And I reached out to someone else, an old friend from college who'd gone into investigative journalism. She owed me a favor. When I told her what I had, she jumped on it. Within a week, we had enough to write a bombshell article. But I wasn't ready to publish it yet. Because I wanted my parents to feel it. Personally, I had a plan. One that would make them experience the same humiliation, the same exposure they'd inflicted on others. And it all started with a dinner invitation. I called my mom and said I wanted to host a dinner. For what occasion? She asked. No occasion, I said. Just family. I want to say thank you for everything you've done for me. She melted on the phone. Oh honey, of course. That's so thoughtful. I reserved a private room at their favorite restaurant. Not the one from before, this one was fancier. More attention. More guests. I told them to invite close friends and a few business associates. They had no idea what was coming. I also invited Marisol. She was hesitant at first. I don't want to be your weapon. You're not, I said. You're the truth. And it's time everyone sees it. I had the journalist come too, posing as a guest. She brought a camera hidden in her purse. The article was ready to drop. All we needed was the final scene. That night, my parents walked in dressed to impress. My mom had her diamond earrings on. My dad wore the same smug grin he always had in public. The room was full. Glasses clinked. Laughter filled the air. Then I stood up. I tapped my glass and smiled. I want to say something. They turned to look at me. My heart pounded. This dinner is a thank you. But it's also a goodbye. My dad frowned. What are you talking about? I turned to Marisol. She stood up beside me. This is Marisol, the woman you humiliated last week. Gasps. She's not a stranger. She's someone I care about. Someone who represents every person you've stepped on to build your empire. My mom stood up. Liam, sit down right now. No. You sit. And listen. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the screen in the room, and hit play. Testimonies. Lawsuit files. Photos. Names. Faces. Everything. They watched in horror as their empire cracked, right there, in front of friends and colleagues. And in that moment, I saw it. Their reputation crumbling. Exactly as they deserved. For a full minute, the room was silent. Nobody knew what to say. The screen behind me kept flashing images, faces of workers my father had exploited, quotes from court settlements, tax documents my mother had signed. The more I showed, the harder it was to breathe. But I kept going. I had to. My dad's face turned beet red. Turn that off, he roared, charging toward me. But he didn't get far. Two of his associates, men from a local contractors' union, stood up and blocked him. You better sit down, Rick, one of them said. This is serious. My mother just froze, her lips parted in shock. She looked at me like she didn't recognize her own son. You planned this, she whispered. I nodded. Every detail. Gasps erupted when I played the voice recordings. I hadn't planned to include them, but Marisol had captured one more recently, one of his foremen threatening to call immigration on a worker who asked for a break. Shut it off, my dad screamed. I won't, I said. Because this is who you are. People started to get up. Some walked out. Others filmed everything. It was chaos. But I felt free. The journalist sent me a text, going live in 3 minutes. I looked up at my parents. The article drops tonight, I said calmly. By morning, everyone will know. My dad lunged again, but someone pulled him back. My mom finally found her voice. You've ruined us. No, I said. You ruined yourselves. I just turned on the light. And then I left. By the time I got home, the article was already viral. Headline, Beneath the Suit, the truth behind Rick and Diane Wallace's empire of exploitation. Subhead, they built $1 million business, on the backs of undocumented workers they threatened and underpaid. Photos, names, lawsuits, testimonies, all laid out, plain and brutal. My phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from cousins, old friends, reporters, even people I hadn't talked to in years. One message stood out. From my old high school teacher. I always wondered how they got so rich so fast. Proud of you for standing up, Liam. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was nervous. Because I felt peaceful. Like a knot had been untied inside me. By morning, things moved fast. My dad's company's website was taken offline. Local news stations picked up the story. Protesters showed up outside the office. 2 former employees filed new complaints, encouraged by the article. And my parents. They tried to do damage control. Press releases. Lawyer statements. My mom even posted a fake apology on Facebook. But it was too late. People had seen the truth. And unlike my parents, the internet doesn't forget. 2 days later, they showed up at my door. I opened it and stared at them. The same people who, just a week ago, humiliated a kind waitress and laughed about it. Now they stood here like broken dolls. My mother's makeup was smeared. My dad had bags under his eyes and a cracked phone in his hand. We need to talk, she said. I don't think we do. Please, my dad said, softer than I'd ever heard him speak. I let them in. They sat on my couch like guests in a stranger's home. My dad started. You blindsided us. You lied to the world. It wasn't supposed to go this far. It went that far the moment you looked Marisol in the eye and decided she was beneath you. My mom started crying. We're ruined, she whispered. Do you understand that? You're not ruined, I said. You're exposed. My dad clenched his fists. Do you hate us? That question hit harder than I expected. No, I said after a long pause. I hate what you've become. And I hate that you thought it was okay. They were silent. Then my mom said something that made my blood run cold. We were just trying to build something. For you. I shook my head. No. You were building something for yourselves. And it cost everyone else everything. My dad stood. What do you want from us? An apology? No. I want you to change. I want you to feel what it's like to be powerless. Maybe then you'll understand the people you stepped on. My mom looked at me with tear-streaked cheeks. What are we supposed to do now? I looked her in the eye. Live with the truth. They left without another word. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their son. I felt like something stronger. Like a man who had finally chosen his own legacy, not the one built on lies. A week passed. It was like watching a slow-motion collapse. Every day, a new headline, a new revelation. My father's past business deals were now under review. Former employees were coming forward in droves. My mom's involvement with the finances was raising legal questions. But what hit them hardest wasn't the lawsuits or the money. It was the silence. They stopped being invited to the church luncheons. Their phones stopped ringing. Their friends vanished. My father, who once held a seat on the local planning board, was asked to resign. The mayor issued a statement distancing himself. I watched it all unfold from my apartment like I was watching a building crumble that I once lived in but no longer belonged to. And yet, something in me still hurt. Not regret. Not guilt. But the pain of knowing I had destroyed what little was left of my illusion of family. Marisol and I met up again in the same park. She handed me a folded napkin. You dropped this the night we reconnected. I opened it. It was an old college photo, the two of us smiling, arms over each other's shoulders, carefree. Thank you, I said. She smiled. They don't deserve your pain. I know. But it's still there. She looked at me carefully. You burned down their world. What are you going to build next? That question stuck with me. By the third week, the pressure cracked them. They filed for bankruptcy. All the assets, the lake house, the second car, the club memberships, started disappearing. And with them, so did the last shreds of their dignity. The media had moved on to other scandals, but in our town, the damage lingered. People whispered in grocery stores. Strangers left comments on old social posts. The fall from grace was complete. And in the middle of it all, I felt something I hadn't expected. Emptiness. I had set out to expose the truth, and I had. I thought it would heal something in me. But healing doesn't come from revenge alone. It comes from rebuilding. From standing for something better. That's why I started talking. I went on a podcast, then another. I shared Marisol's story, and others like hers, not as a headline, but as human truth. I didn't name my parents anymore. They'd been named enough. Now it was about the people they hurt. And it turns out, when you use your voice for something bigger than payback, people listen. One of the podcasts reached thousands. Messages poured in. My uncle went through the same thing. Thank you for sharing. Your story made me speak up at work. I was terrified. But now I feel seen. For anyone watching right now who's been told to stay quiet, don't. Tell your story. Because sometimes, the only way to fight power is with truth. Loud, unfiltered, and undeniable. 3 months later, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A handwritten envelope with my name on it. No return address. Inside was a note in my father's handwriting. Liam, you were right to expose us. I see that now. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, your mother is leaving. She can't face this anymore. And I don't blame her. I thought I was building a future for our family. But I see now that I built a prison of pride. You're free from it. And for that, I'm proud. In the only way I know how. Take care of yourself, Dad. I read it 3 times. I didn't cry. But I sat there for a long time, holding that piece of paper, feeling like the walls of a prison were finally dissolving around me. My mom moved in with her sister. My dad disappeared from public life. Some said he left town. Others said he moved to a cabin upstate. I didn't care. Because this story wasn't about them anymore. It was about the truth. About standing up. About never letting someone else's shame become your silence. And the next time I saw Marisol, I thanked her again. Not just for helping bring the truth out, but for reminding me who I really was, before the suits, the lies, and the guilt. After the letter, I stopped checking the news about my parents. I'd already watched the damage. Replaying it wouldn't bring me peace. Instead, I poured my energy into something else, helping the people they hurt. With Marisol's help, we created a small legal fund. Nothing huge, just enough to cover initial fees for workers like her who had been silenced for too long. I reached out to the journalist again and asked her to do follow-up pieces, not about my parents, but about the survivors. One story led to another, and then another. Soon, we were getting messages from all over the state. One woman had been working for a hotel chain under the table for 7 years. Another man said his brother died in a construction accident and was buried in an unmarked grave, undocumented and erased. I couldn't fix everything, but I could amplify their voices. And maybe, that was the real revenge. Not just destroying my parents' image, but turning the shame they caused into something useful. Something true. She showed up at my apartment on a rainy Sunday afternoon. No call. No warning. I opened the door to see her soaked in a beige trench coat, holding a plastic grocery bag like it was a peace offering. "Hi," she said, her voice shaky. I stepped aside and let her in. She looked thinner. Older. Her hair had lost its shine. Her heels were scuffed. "I'm not here to defend anything," she said. "I just needed to look you in the eye again." I stayed quiet. She sat down on the edge of the couch, back straight like she was still in one of her country club luncheons. "I've lost everything," she whispered. "The house. The friends. Even your father. He barely speaks now." I nodded slowly. Actions have consequences. She looked down at her hands. "Do you hate me?" I let the silence settle. Then I said, "No. I just stopped pretending you were someone you're not." She swallowed hard. I didn't know how to stop it. "Your father. He made the choices, and I followed. You signed the checks." "I know." She pulled a photo from her coat. It was me, as a kid, holding a toy hammer, sitting on Dad's lap. "We wanted to build a legacy," she said. "We just didn't realize it was rotting from the inside." I took the photo but didn't smile. She stood up to leave. At the door, she turned and whispered, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, I believed her. A month later, I was invited to speak at a small community college. The professor had read the article, followed the podcast, and wanted students to hear from someone who'd stood up to power. I almost declined. But Marisol looked at me and said, "You've come this far. Don't stop now." So I went. I stood in front of a small room of maybe 40 students. Nervous. Sweating. But honest. I told them what happened. The restaurant. The lawsuits. The shame. The rage. The truth. I told them how I chose to stop being silent. One student raised her hand. How do you deal with the guilt of exposing your own parents? I took a deep breath and said, you can love someone and still hold them accountable. Silence isn't loyalty, it's complicity. Another student asked, would you do it all again? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. Because sometimes, vengeance isn't about anger. It's about refusing to protect the lie anymore. And if that means your world burns down, then so be it. Better ashes than rot. I hadn't heard from my father since the letter. But one afternoon, Marisol and I were walking out of a community meeting when I saw him, standing across the street, watching. He looked nothing like the man I remembered. His suit was gone. His shoulders were slumped. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He didn't cross the street, just stood there, watching. And then he turned and walked away. Was that? Marisol asked. Yeah. She didn't say anything else. Neither did I. Later that night, I found an envelope under my door. No name. Just a piece of paper with an address written in shaky handwriting, and a time. I knew what it meant. I told Marisol. She looked worried. You don't have to go, she said. But I did. Not for him. For closure. The address led me to a run-down cabin in the woods about an hour outside the city. It was cold. Quiet. The kind of place people go to disappear. My father opened the door before I knocked. Come in, he said. I stepped inside. The place smelled like wood smoke and dust. A single chair. A small table. A stack of newspapers with our last name on every headline. I've been reading everything, he said. Watching it all fall. I didn't respond. He poured 2 glasses of water, handed me one, and sat. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. Good, I answered. He nodded slowly. I just wanted to say one thing. I waited. I thought I was making you proud, he said. Every deal I made. Every shortcut I took. I kept telling myself it was for you. For our name. I looked him in the eye. If you ever really cared about me, you would have wanted me to respect you. Not just benefit from your lies. He closed his eyes. I know. We sat in silence for a long time. Then I stood. You asked me to come. You said your piece. Now I'm done. As I reached the door, he said one last thing. I lost everything. But watching you stand up to me. Weirdly, that's the only time I ever felt like I raised a real man. I didn't turn around. I just walked out into the cold and closed the door behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from regret. But from something more surprising. Relief. It was over. The confrontation. The silence. The guilt. I'd faced the man who once ruled my world. I'd stood my ground. And now, I felt weightless. The next morning, I got a call. The community center where we'd been helping immigrant workers had received a grant, thanks to the awareness our story brought. They wanted to name a new program after Marisol. She cried when I told her. I just smiled. This is what rebuilding looks like, I said. She took my hand. It's also what healing looks like. So to anyone watching this story, maybe wondering what the point of revenge is, let me say this. Sometimes, the revenge is exposing the truth. Sometimes, it's watching them fall. But the best revenge? It's rising from the wreckage they caused and building something better, not out of spite, but out of principle. And if this story moved you, even just a little, share it. Because someone out there is still being silenced, and they need to know they're not alone. The community center event was packed. I stood near the back, letting Marisol have the spotlight. It was her moment. She told her story with quiet strength, not dramatic, not angry, just honest. And that honesty held more power than any courtroom ever could. When they unveiled the plaque with her name on it, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "This isn't about me," she said. I smiled. "It kind of is." "No," she said softly. "It's about every girl who thinks she has to stay quiet to keep her job. Every man too scared to speak up because someone's holding papers over his head. This gives them a voice." She looked around the room, at the people clapping, smiling, believing. "This is what legacy really means," she said. That word hit hard. Legacy. My parents had tried to build one out of stone and silence. We were building one out of truth. And it was stronger. One afternoon, weeks later, I went to clean out the storage unit my parents had kept. The rental was under my name, one of many financial tricks they'd used over the years. I opened the metal door and stepped inside. Boxes. So many boxes. Tax files. Photos. Awards. Even a box full of church pamphlets with my father's face on the back. I sat on the floor and opened a crate labeled Family, Private. Inside, I found something strange. Letters. Dozens of them. Written by former workers. Some were thank you notes from years ago, before things got dark. Others were desperate pleas for help, never opened. One letter was from a woman whose husband had died in a work accident. She begged for financial help. My father never responded. I sat there for hours reading them. The paper felt like it was burning in my hands. These were ghosts. Testimonies no one ever heard. People who were forgotten, buried under concrete deals and contractor contracts. I gathered the letters, scanned them, and added them to our digital archive. Their voices would be heard now, even if it was too late for some of them. 3 months after the article dropped, I got a call from the local newspaper. They were doing a piece on accountability and wanted to feature our work. I hesitated, but then I remembered the podcast, the speeches, the students, the letters, and I said yes. The interview was simple. I told them what happened, what I learned, and what I'd do again. They asked if I had any regrets. I said no. Because the truth is, even though I lost my relationship with my parents, even though I'd been dragged through every emotion possible, I came out of it stronger, clearer, and maybe, just maybe, better. When the article came out, people reached out again. Donations increased. A local law firm offered pro bono work for our foundation. A non-profit asked us to collaborate. The seed we planted had started to grow. And it wasn't revenge anymore. It was justice. Real, quiet, steady justice. The kind that doesn't go viral, but actually changes lives. And that, more than anything, made everything worth it. I never expected the prosecutor to reach out. But one morning, I got an official-looking envelope in the mail. Inside was a request to testify, not in a criminal case, but in a civil action against my parents' company. A class action lawsuit had been filed by several former workers. Marisol was one of them. "They're finally being held accountable," she told me on the phone. Really, legally, publicly. Part of me wanted to avoid it. I'd already exposed them. Already watched them fall. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about people whose lives had been torn apart. So I agreed. On the day of the hearing, I wore a plain black suit. No tie. Just honest clothes. Inside the courtroom, I saw my father again. He didn't look angry this time. He looked tired. His eyes met mine only once, then dropped to the floor. I took the stand. And when they asked me what I witnessed, what I knew, what I'd learned, I told the whole truth. No theatrics. No drama. Just facts. And when I stepped down, I saw tears in the eyes of a woman in the back. Someone I didn't know, but whose voice had finally been heard through hours. That was justice. And it wasn't finished yet. After the hearing, my aunt called. Marisol translated when needed, though most of the conversation was filled with laughter, not words. At one point, her father raised his glass and said something in Spanish I didn't understand fully. Marisol translated softly. He said you brought dignity back to people who thought they'd lost it forever. I swallowed hard. It hit deeper than I expected. Not because it was praise, but because it was the kind of legacy my parents never gave me. One rooted in respect, not power. That night, as we walked back to her apartment, she slipped her hand into mine. I think this is what peace feels like, she said. And for once, I agreed. I went back to the storage unit one last time. There was one box left. Unlabeled. Taped shut. Heavy. I carried it to the back of my car, opened the lid, and found something strange inside. Journals. My dad's. Dozens of them. Every page was dated. Some pages had diagrams and business notes. Others had rants. But near the end, toward the more recent journals, I found entries that read more like confessions. They don't respect me. They fear me. If Liam ever knew what I did, he'd hate me forever. I saw that waitress's face. She reminded me of the man I stepped over in '08. I'm not a monster. I just kept moving forward. I sat there for hours, reading. Not out of sympathy, but out of curiosity, to see how a man who thought he was untouchable unraveled one line at a time. And then I reached the final journal. Blank. Not a single word written. And I realized he'd run out of lies. I didn't take the box with me. I left it there. Some stories don't deserve to be archived. Others, like ours, are still being written every day, in voices louder than silence ever hoped to be. I wasn't planning to attend the ceremony. The email had come a month earlier, an invitation to receive a local civic award for community impact. I ignored it. Not because I wasn't honored, but because I still struggled with the idea of being the face of anything. But Marisol insisted. You didn't start this to be recognized, she said. But that's exactly why you should be. So I went. The auditorium was full. Small-town politicians, school leaders, non-profit directors. I sat in the back, trying not to feel like I didn't belong. When they called my name, I walked to the stage with shaking hands. The presenter began. Liam Wallace didn't just stand up to injustice. He stood up to his own family, to the very foundation he was raised on, and chose to build something better. Not with revenge in his heart, but with purpose in his hands. I looked out over the crowd. Somewhere in the middle row, I saw my mother. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just nodded. And somehow, that was enough. I accepted the plaque, said thank you, and stepped back into the world I had helped rebuild, not out of bitterness, but truth. And this time, the applause didn't feel like noise. It felt like healing. It happened during a community literacy event. A young boy sat at the corner table, flipping through picture books. His mother was one of the newer immigrants we were helping. She barely spoke English, but she showed up to every class, eager to learn. When the boy stood up, he walked toward me holding a crayon drawing. It was me. And Marisol. Standing under a tree. Smiling. He pointed to the stick figure labeled Liam and said, You help people. I knelt beside him. Is that me? He nodded proudly. Then added, My mom says you helped her find her voice. I didn't know what to say. I looked over and saw his mom watching us with tears in her eyes. That one drawing, with its crooked lines and bright colors, said more than any plaque or article ever could. I kept it, framed it, and hung it right above my desk. Because that's what legacy really looks like. Not concrete. Not money. But people. Lives changed. Voices found. And children who grow up knowing what dignity sounds like. It's been a year since that dinner, the night it all began. People ask me now if I'd do it again. Expose my family. Shatter the illusion. Trade comfort for conscience. And the answer is always yes. Because revenge isn't always about rage. Sometimes, it's about refusing to carry someone else's guilt one more step. I still get messages from strangers. Some say thank you. Some share their own stories. Some are just finding the courage to speak. And every time I reply, I tell them the same thing. You don't need to burn everything down. But you do need to stop pretending it isn't on fire. Marisol and I still work side by side. The foundation is growing. Slowly, yes, but the right way. With truth at the core. My parents. My mother volunteers now. Quietly. No attention. No redemption arc. Just quiet effort. My father. I haven't heard from him again. Maybe that's the ending he chose. But me. I'm still writing. Still rebuilding. Still reminding others that the final chapter doesn't belong to the people who tried to silence you. It belongs to the voice you choose to use. And now, finally, mine is loud enough to never be ignored again. We hosted a dinner last week. Not at a fancy restaurant. Not with polished wine glasses or reserved seating. Just folding chairs, home-cooked food, and people who had every reason to never trust again. Laughing, eating, living. Marisol called it our new family table. No head of the table. No hierarchy. Just space for everyone. A woman stood and toasted in Spanish. I didn't understand every word, but I felt it. Deeply. She pointed to Marisol, then to me, then to the group. Everyone clapped. And for a moment, I let myself sit back and watch. This was the world I wanted to be part of. Not the one I was raised in, but the one I helped create. Through fire, through grief, through truth. I thought back to that first dinner. The humiliation. The silence. The rage. And I realized something I hadn't said out loud before. They thought they broke me that night. But all they did was wake me up. Because when you finally choose truth over comfort, something shifts. You stop begging for a seat at their table. And you start building your own. I walk differently now. Not faster. Not louder. But freer. I don't flinch when people mention my last name. I don't brace for shame. Because I know what I've done to redefine it. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a son of frauds. I see a man who chose the hard road and kept walking. And to those watching this story, still unsure whether they should speak, whether they should act, whether telling the truth is worth the cost, let me leave you with this. You don't owe your silence to anyone who built their comfort on your fear. You don't have to protect people who never protected you. And if you're scared, that's normal. Speak anyway. Act anyway. Because once you break the silence, once you light that match, you'll never go back to living in their shadow again. This was my story. And now, it's yours too. Use it. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it moved you in any way, share it. Someone out there might be waiting for exactly this kind of courage to finally tell their own truth.